The Tuesday, October 26, 2021 meeting of the Independent Community Police Oversight Commission will come to order. Ms. Janess, could you call the roll for us?
Absolutely. Commissioner Ameri.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Thank you. Please place your location. Thank you for reminding me. Commissioner Billups.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Okay. Commissioner Shipp.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Commissioner Carter.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Chair Jackson.
Present in Pittsfield Township.
Commissioner Muhammad.
Present Ann Arbor.
Vice Chair Tadoro Hargraves.
Present in Lodi Township.
Councilmember Ralawi.
Present Ann Arbor.
Councilmember Song.
Present Ann Arbor.
Did I miss anyone?
I don't think you did. I think you got everybody. And so before we, I would like to propose some changes to the agenda.
Sure.
Before we get to the point of approving it, we are going to reschedule the report on the Police Officers Wellness Program until November 23rd. And we also need to add complaint review process to old business. Are there any other changes we might need to make? Is there then a motion to make those amendments?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And so then is there a motion to approve the agenda with the new amendments?
Yes.
Second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And so now we've come to the time for the public forum. If there are people who would like to speak at the public forum, you can call 877-853-5247. The meeting ID is 935-1520-9819.
Yes, we have one caller. Good afternoon.
Is it *6 to unmute?
Yes. He said *6, or you just a listener this evening?
I'm expecting Dr. Karpiak to join us when we talk about some of the traffic stop updates. But I do not know if that is him on the phone. Yep, that is probably him.
Hello.
Hello. Did you have a public comment, or are you just getting ready for the traffic stop discussion?
This is Dr. Karpiak, and I have no comment at this time.
Okay, thank you. Hang on though for us, please, and thank you. Any other callers, Denise?
That's it. Thank you.
Nobody else at this time, Denise?
There's no other callers.
Okay, so in that
Hold on.
case,
I'm sorry, someone just came in.
excellent.
Good afternoon. *6, please.
Oh, one more time. Perfect.
Okay. Good afternoon.
Harvey Summers.
Say that again, please.
Harvey Summers.
Okay, it's
calling
Harvey
from
Summers.
Scioto Township. I have just one comment about, it's a little difficult to keep up with your meeting. The email that came out yesterday from the city of Ann Arbor said to watch online at a2gov arbororg/watch, and that link did not work. And so I had to find you on my television, and just wanted to say that somebody should look at that. And then a Zoom approach to the meeting would be so very welcome. And so I want to thank you for all you're doing and just ask you to think about that. Bye.
Thank you, Mr. Summers.
Thank you.
And so CTN, if we can figure out if the link on the website is live, if it is live now. And then I know we've had this conversation before, but I will follow up about how we might be able to have people participate a little bit more actively in these meetings, as long as we are still doing them remotely. And then perhaps even when we are in person, if we might be able to have people join us remotely by way of the meetings. Because I think we've learned through this process that access is certainly important, but people being able to participate on the phone is not the same as them being able to participate, more in person, particularly for a meeting the size of ours. It's not quite as unwieldy as city council, so. Is there a motion? Is there any discussion of the September meeting minutes? I am assuming that everyone has had a chance to look at them. Are there any additions or corrections or comments to them? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the September meeting minutes?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the September 28, 2021 ECPAC meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
All in favor of approving the
Aye.
September meeting minutes? Aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, old business. So we need to talk about traffic stop data. Dr. Karpiak is on the phone. And the first thing we should probably talk about is the ongoing process of actually getting the data from the police department. He has been running point on this, and of course we are participating in that process, but at this time, I think, after all of this time, we still do not actually have the working traffic stop data set yet. Is that correct, Dr. Karpiak?
Yes, that is correct.
So can you
We're
update
still
us on
missing-
what are we missing?
So right now we're missing a few fields in the data set. Age being one of them, which we've been told is coming soon. And there's some other fields that we've requested that we actually haven't heard affirmative or negative on.
Also, we were originally given traffic stop data for 2017, 2018, and 2019, and the latest data set we were given was 2018, 2019, and 2020. That might sound like an improvement, but for us, we know that 2020 is an anomaly year, particularly for traffic stops, when because of COVID, the activity of police making traffic stops was drastically changed. And so for us to have a good picture of what's happening in Ann Arbor, we would prefer to have three sort of typical years, 2017, 2018, and 2019. However, one tiny bright spot in this is that because of the request of Dr. Karpiak, other institutions will have access to new information. Can you expand on that a bit?
Sure. It has to do with the age specifically. We requested that age be included in the data set that was given to us. And initially that was a bit of a problem, I understand, in that it was the data comes through a program called Clemis and then through an application called Business Insider. And Business Insider, I believe is the name of it, was treating age as a protected category. And so it's actually technically impossible for AAPD to share it with us. But Jeffrey McDowell worked behind the scenes to actually change that in that application, which then now makes it possible for basically all the departments and municipalities throughout Southeast Michigan that use the Clemis system through Business Insider to now share that data in a way that they were previously unable to.
So thank you for pursuing that, and thanks to Jeff McDowell from the Ann Arbor Police Department for working on his end on that. We are eagerly awaiting the corrected data set, and Dr. Karpiak is the head of the Southeast Michigan Criminal Justice Policy Research Project, whose acronym is SMART. His team will be doing the analysis of the traffic stop data. And they are a team of criminal research experts who will be diving in and making complicated decisions about how to analyze the data and the best way to do that, because there are many ways to do that, and trying to get the most accurate information from this just sort of clump of information and make something useful and informative for the community. And so his team will be doing that. And the plan has been all along to have public discussions about that data, certainly to write a report about that data, and perhaps for them to publish some work about what they found. Do you want to add anything to that, sort of the goals of sort of like the public engagement piece?
Sure. Well, for sure, we plan to do an analysis of the data, which you're absolutely right. There are many ways to do an analysis of this type of data. But another component that we're really hoping to do alongside ICPOC and the broader community is to think about ways that the data can be useful for the community at large. How it could help make decisions, how it could help educate about the nature of our collective public safety. And that's really, I think we're looking forward to having more conversations about what we can do as both a educational component and a public service component with this data in this report.
And I think that's an important part of furthering the goal of transparency. It's helpful for people to understand how processes work in the city. And so in addition to writing a report, we would love to facilitate community conversations about what's going on with traffic stops when we get to that point. And then last but not least, the Southeast Michigan Criminal Justice Policy Research Project partnered with ICPOC to apply for a grant from the Community Foundation of Southeast Michigan, and was awarded funds from that competitive process. And it's the Community Policing Innovations Fund, and they were specifically looking to help fund analysis of policing processes that would be useful for the community, and to help create community and law enforcement partnerships. And so we're really excited. Certainly the SMART team did the bulk of the work. I did just a teeny bit of that application process, but we were very excited to be awarded the grant. And ICPOC will not be receiving any money. It will go to facilitate some of the complex analyses that we think will probably be necessary to sort of to analyze the data in a way that makes sense. And so that there will be, that grant was sort of just awarded earlier this month. And so the process will start pretty soon. And we will have a meeting about how everything will work going forward. But I just wanted to sort of point that out because we're excited about being able to partner with a community group in that way and their criminal justice research policy, and be able to make use of some experts that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise without these funds. So we are very excited about that.
Good.
Commissioner Hoffman.
Yes, it looks like it's a one-time grant, and what time limit it has? Is it 1 year? Is it 6 months? Is it 2 years? What
You know,
time?
I do not know that yet. I do not know. I know, like in a typical grant, you have X amount of time to spend the money. I do not know that yet. Our meeting with the funders and SMART will be coming up. It had to be rescheduled, and so I will know that in the near future. There were a number of other cities in Southeast Michigan that were also awarded the grant, and so I will have a meeting with the SMART team and with the funders to talk about the details of that. Hopefully, that meeting will happen in the next week or so.
Thank you.
Would it help if I gave just a little bit more context on?
Absolutely,
the
please,
grant?
and thank you.
All right. So it's the Community Policing Innovations Initiative is the specific program. The larger philanthropic organization is the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan, which actually funds a lot of different projects throughout Southeast Michigan. Some people might be familiar with it. What they like to do with the funds is you're absolutely correct. They don't like to give them, they like to support innovative community partnerships with either law enforcement agencies or city governments. So they were looking for that as projects that they like to kind of support. But what their model is that instead of giving the money to police, which they don't want to do, they don't want to give it to police departments or necessarily directly to community groups. What they give it is they give the money basically to a network of technical support partners that are brought in to help support and facilitate the partnership and to help establish goals in partnership with all the partners and then make sure they happen. And so SMART has been brought in as basically one of those technical and training assistance providers that will facilitate this project. But it very well could entail bringing in some other kinds of partners as well once we start kind of establishing goals and timelines and broader strategies and objectives, which are all part of the framework of this grant. The strategies, goals, outcomes kind of thing could be a multi-year project, 3 years down the road, 5 years down the road, but the funding for the technical assistance providers is for 1 year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else that Dr. Karpiak, you want to talk about the grant for that before we move on?
I don't have much more to say in that a large part of what the goals and specific objectives and benchmarks for what we want to do are part of the conversation that I think that we'll be having going forward. But I think the overall idea is to bring in some resources to do exactly what I mentioned before, making this data available, making it accessible, making it comprehensible to the larger Ann Arbor community, to rethink how data is shared and collected and made use of to inform the work of ICPOC, are all the kinds of things that these resources can be brought to bear on.
And what we hope is that, you know, it will increase transparency and that people will have a better understanding of what's actually happening in the city. And so Dr. Karpiak mentioned making the work more comprehensible, more digestible. And I am a quantitative researcher. And the ways in which I thought this traffic data could be analyzed were all wrong. And it appears that there may need to be some qualitative work that happens, which is way above the way more complicated kind of work than what I typically do. I do lots of statistics and lots of analysis that way. And so I have joined a class basically in traffic stop data analysis, where every other week, Dr. Karpiak makes me and others read really complicated journal articles about how best to do this. And so I am learning along with everyone else. Well, most of the people are far ahead of me in this, how this analysis might happen and why it might happen in the way that it does. And thus, we'll be able to talk about intelligibly why we chose this way to analyze the data. The criminal justice people could do this easily, but this is challenging for me, but at least I will be able to be conversant in, we did it this way instead of that way because of these things. Here are the flaws, here are the problems perhaps with doing that. Councilmember Song, I saw your hand was raised.
I'm really curious as to what the data sets reveal, if there are any biases in our work. I guess I have two questions for Mr. Karpiak. Will this be something similar to like Stanford's open policing project? Because I took a look at their work earlier and how they have data sets from states all around the country. And then if this work advances, is there a possibility of having this project expand to other cities in the county, and so that we can coordinate with maybe the sheriff's office, getting other cities to participate?
How this data is shared, I think we hopefully can think creatively about, including using something like the Stanford Open Policing project as a model for how we might begin to make use of data that's already being collected by the Ann Arbor Police Department. I think could be a great model, especially since, just a side note, one of the interesting and a little bit frustrating parts of specifically that Stanford project is that it collected but could not make use of data from Michigan, and that it collected data from, I think, several thousand incidents from the Michigan State Police traffic stop data, but had to basically throw it all out in making its larger conclusions because of the way race was recorded in those reports. It made it basically all the data unusable for Michigan. And so there's work to be done there. But again, the ultimate way that we make use of and share and use this data for public decision making, I think one of the exciting parts about this grant from the Community Foundation of Southeast Michigan is it lets us think a little bit more creatively about what we could do there. That answer your question?
Yep, that's helpful. Thank you.
I know you guys have heard me talk about that before, actually, how startling it was that, Michigan was, I think, #1 on the list in terms of having this sort of lack of transparency in terms of being able to look at traffic stops. And so I was very specific to say, I was talking about the state of Michigan, the Michigan State Police, who more than would be likely due to coincidence, mark people's race as undetermined. And so we've had conversations about that, and we've had conversations in this meeting about that, about how do you identify people's ethnicity and the pros and cons of asking people, the pros and cons of saying that. And I know some people here have said they'd be offended if someone asked them what their ethnicity was. But we have talked about the need for that information as it's collected to be accurate. And right now, any ethnicity data collected by police as indicated on a traffic stop data or on a ticket is the officer's perception of someone's ethnicity. And so, I have long been thinking about some public education campaign. Could we ask the police to, for 12, 18 months, say, hey, city council has asked us to really double down on the accuracy of the ethnicity data that we're collecting. And we're sorry, sir, as we pull you over, but we have to ask you how you identify. And it's not us, it's city council making us do this. And we just want to record this accurately. And could we do that for some period of time, to say, we just want a trial run and we want to see, can we, does it make a difference if we ask people, do the data points look any different, for example? But what Michigan State Police do is just say they can't tell, and they say that all the time. And so many people speculate that there might be some specific reasons why they do that. But in any case, it certainly isn't very transparent. And so you can't make any conclusions about who gets stopped and how. And you could, you'd have to determine why that happens. And I know we've had that conversation here, but it is a problem with the project. Councilmember Song, did you have another question? Did you ask them both?
Oh, I was just saying, I was hoping to look for biases. That was the two questions were if it was similar to the Stanford project and if we'd expand it to the county. So I think Kevin covered both.
And that's outside our bailiwick. Would Celine, oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Dr. Karpiak.
Sorry, to answer that second question. Certainly, I think, and what we do here can be a model for something that could be done similarly at the county level. The county uses the same CLEMIS system that Ann Arbor does, and so the age category that was previously unshareable is now shareable for Washtenaw County, as well as all the other counties in Southeast Michigan. So it absolutely could be a model. It would require a different set of partners and a different set of agreements, but I think it could be a model for sure.
And so we'd have to look at, would you be interested in information from the Washtenaw County Sheriff's Office? Would you be interested from other municipalities like Saline, the city of Ypsilanti? Would those people be willing to sort of collect that data and analyze that data and form those partnerships to do that so that we could have a big picture of what's going on across Washtenaw County? And so there is interest in what Ann Arbor does in terms of, serving as a model. I'm sorry, Commissioner Offman.
Yeah, is it possible to make it easier for the police officers who are involved in traffic and all these things, instead of just telling the people right away, this is what's happening, is if there's any decision on part of the city council to say that we are going to have this kind of project that would last X number of months, and just orient the people that this might happen. So if you are going to be asked by the police if you are stopped, it's just give some people a bit of information, knowledge that this project is going to start or starting, and based on the recommendations or based on decisions that was done by the city council, that we are basically executing the decision of the city council, versus abrupt just come to somebody and say, what type of ethnicity you think you are. So it's just make it a little bit easier that this stuff is happening, and you could start somewhere, next month or in the beginning of the 2022 or something like that.
Well, if this body is interested in asking city council to do that, and if city council, our liaisons here think there's an appetite for that, we can certainly write a resolution to ask city council to ask the police department to begin to collect that data. And one of the things that often happens with these kinds of resolutions is that there's a training period, there's a learning period, and there's a public information period. Where you educate the public about what's getting ready to happen before it happens, when police officers get trained on how to do what they're going to do before they need to do it. And then once those things are in place, you could perhaps start a campaign where you do something like this, where you start to collect data. And so if this body is interested in that, we could certainly write a resolution and present it to council and ask them to consider it. And we could certainly work with the police department and the city attorney's office to make sure that any such resolution is appropriate. And then we could ask council to have the police department act on their guidance. The reason why we have gender information collected is because city council decided that the police should do that. I think it was 2009. Deputy Chief Forsberg and I were talking about that actually with Dr. Karpiak in a meeting, and city council said, hey, we would like to know that. And so start collecting that data. And so that is when that started, because city council said so. And so certainly we could ask about initiative for some period of time to try to collect accurate data on ethnicity. I'm sorry, go ahead, Council Commissioner Amiri.
My thinking is like if I think of immigrants and people who don't have documentation being in this country and African American who don't look African American might not want to reveal that. That's something to keep in the back of your mind. Why are they asking me, and when you do, when the city of Ann Arbor do the announcement and public information, these are the last people the information reach to. They don't go to city council. They don't look what resolution. They not necessarily go to MLive and search for that kind of information. So imagine yourself a recent immigrant who don't have documentation, and the police ask you, "What's your background?" And you're going to say, "I'm Puerto Rican," or "I'm from Mexico," or whatever country, or Syria or Iraq, and you don't have documentation, and you're here. So, or that also go for minorities who feel there's a bias. They might think they're asking them, and if I am of Mexican origin, they're going to give me a ticket. Or if I'm, that we have to keep that in mind as we do these kind of things, not assume that everybody read what the city council does and assume, because their experience tell them otherwise.
Yeah.
So I don't know how to deal with that, but it is something I don't have an answer how to deal with that, but it's something to keep in the back of our mind as we move forward, if we decide to move forward.
Absolutely. And your point about the people who could be most negatively impacted being the last to have the information disseminated to them resonates so clearly. That seems to be the case almost all of the time. And thus, any kind of public information campaign should take that into account before it starts, and it should make a concerted effort to use people to get that information out in ways that information is not typically disseminated. And so
sometimes when the information is disseminated, people still don't trust. There's a different experience between certain people, certain class, certain ethnicity with the government. So if the government say we're doing this, so we want to be sure that everybody is treated equally, and the answer will say, "Oh, well, this is we've heard this before. We have experience." So that's actually complicated work, but it's good to be aware of it as we move forward.
Yep. And I think that the reason why it's complicated is the reason why we do our work. That very reason is why we are here. And so it is incumbent upon us to make sure. And so what we're talking about is people who get stopped. They're the ones who need to know, right? And so we're going to keep talking about who gets stopped and traffic stops. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. But what you're saying is absolutely why we do our work. Councilmember Ramlawi, you had your hand up too?
Thank you, and appreciate the conversation. As always, Commissioner Amiri, that's a very significant and relative observation to make about minorities who are avoiding persecution in other parts of the world, where giving information as what you're describing causes harm, and for them to give that information out, they have reservations, and so getting that accurate information is very difficult for many different reasons. I was just have a question for Chief Cox or City Prosecutor Arian Slay on whether the legality of doing such and asking these questions, whether there are legal challenges, and what is the current practice, if we can get a refresher as to what the current practice is, if it's just gender that's being asked, or are there other questions to aggregate the information that's being collected.
Gender is not being asked, so I just want to clarify, make sure you didn't misunderstand what I'm saying. That data is being collected. They are definitely not asking people what their gender is. So I just want to make sure that everyone's clear on what I was saying, that information is now being collected. Police are not asking people what their gender is.
Thanks for clarifying that. I guess just asking what the current practice is, and again, if there are legal challenges to maybe asking that information that was earlier described.
Chief Cox, do you want to talk about how people usually identify ethnicity on the ticket when they write it?
It's based on the officer's perception. We don't ask the question unless it's already on the license. I will say this, and it's a little off a little bit from your question. I think the legal aspect of it, I'll certainly let Attorney Slay answer that portion of it, is we're asking, or we potentially might be asking officers in a time when we're trying to build more trust, to ask a probing question that the state doesn't even require on a license or things of that nature, to potentially get information to be researched later for whether or not we're, participating in some type of bias, when the reality is that person right then and there is going to feel like that we are. I would think, and this is just my opinion, I would think that if government, or certainly, from a political perspective, if you want to capture the data, required to be on the license, and then you'll get accurate data almost all the time. We don't have to ask, but the reality is, the state doesn't require it. And so, we could stop people and they could tell us false information. We can stop people and we can guess what it is, but the reality is, I don't even know how reliable it's going to be anyway, unless the state requires it on a license of some type, on what people would like to report. So from my standpoint, I don't know why we would want to put officers in a position to have, we'll put them in a position where we're not building trust, particularly in this day and age, to potentially get research data multiple years later that might not be accurate in the beginning. So, but that's my humble opinion on some of that stuff.
I'm not sure we want to suggest that asking people how they identify is going to be less accurate than officers guessing at it. I mean, I don't think we want to make that comparison. I think what you're saying is it might be challenging for officers to do, and certainly we understand that. We also understand the state of Michigan doesn't require it on a driver's license. Lobbying that is far above our pay grade. I mean, community groups could lobby the state to say everybody needs to self-identify on their driver's license. That's not in our bailiwick, though. But I don't think we want to say that officers guessing at that is more accurate than what people would tell us about themselves. I know, Councilmember Song, you had your hand up again. I'm sorry.
I just want to mention, I'm pretty sure we remember when there were folks in our community who were being deported in the past couple of years, and there's a lot of concern and organizing around immigrant coalitions' rights, and how in Arbor, Chapter 120 of the City Code prohibits public servants from asking about immigration status, except in cases of criminal investigation, warrant, or federal order. That was really meant to encourage trust in our local law enforcement and encourage undocumented people to work with local authorities. So we do have, some of the concerns have been addressed many times over, I think, in the past couple of years, to make sure that we care for our residents and are considerate about their legal status. And I understand that's also shared on the county level too, but correct me if I'm wrong. Thanks.
Commissioner Offman.
The ethnicity is not something that is like, it's not there. In the census, it is there. Is there any way, failing everything? We cannot go and get the right information from the individuals, or because of concerns about the immigration status, or because of minority being treated differently, or the biases and all that stuff. The census is there, and ethnicities are there. Is there any way we can, not asking the police what to do, is from the census, do have access to the information, census information, or it's also privileged information and no one can access that. So I really don't know. And if we're going to be tackling the issue of who's going to be stopped, and if by any chance some segments of our community feels that they are stopped more frequently than others, and we don't know the ethnicity of the individuals, yet we know the stories. It's just how we are going to gain the trust. The other thing is this is not a permanent venture. It is a project that's going to last X number of months, or if we get, say, the number 500 or 1,000, whatever. If we find X, let's just say a particular number, and say if we collected enough information that statistically, if you analyze it, statistically would be significant, is 200, 300, 500, 1,000. And if we reach that point, that's it, we stop it. The information that is collected, is not going to be stored. The only time it's going to be used is for the analysis. And there are no identifiers in terms of, other than ethnicity, we don't know the person. We don't know the name. We don't know the address. We don't know any of that stuff. So I just want to say that it can probably be done if we take into consideration all the deficiencies or all the mistrust or the status of the individuals that we are trying to get information from.
Thank you. Commissioner Billups, I apologize, I missed your hand.
Yeah, no problem. I've been listening. I think it's going to be a hard sell to the public, period. I think it's, and yet it's part of our role to be able to explain it as to why we're collecting this data and why we need this information. But I'm thinking of people who I would reach out to and explain this to. It would be that information is not needed, and I'm not giving it on some level. And so, I think we have to really set our standards on this low. I don't think we're going to get a lot of information this way. I believe it's valuable information that we need, but I'm sitting here trying to figure out how we explain this or sell this to people, that if they're stopped, that this is a question that gets asked for research purposes or whatever.
Do you think people are aware that officers just guess and check the box anyway? That they always check a box?
I think people assume that. Yeah. I think people assume that automatically. And I think you would get some blowback if an officer says, well, can you tell me what your ethnicity is? I believe people are going to say, why do you need to know that? And don't you know? You already know what I am or whatever. You understand what I'm saying? So I think we just got to figure out how we educate people and how we get true data. But I'm sitting here struggling, trying to figure out how this will work. We have time, but we really have to figure it out. So,
yeah, it's definitely not it would not be an easy thing to do. I think it is significant though that the information is being collected now.
Right.
And that's a thing. And so, you could certainly, not you, but one could certainly go in the opposite direction and say, don't collect it at all, but that's not helpful either. And so what we have now are guesstimates about that. And there are people in Ann Arbor who may look ambiguous, but have clearly stated, even in our meeting, that they get a box check that says unknown often. And they feel like, why didn't they just ask me what that is? And other people feel like kind of what you said is, you know what I am.
Right.
But the whole gamut is possible. I think it is fascinating, though, to understand that what we're working with now are guesses and assumptions. Yeah, and that may be good enough because it's what we have. But I would suggest that data would not be collected for a research project as much as it would be collected for accuracy, because the public deserves to know exactly what is happening. And so that data should be accurate, no matter what happens with it, if it's never analyzed. And so I wouldn't suggest that this is, happening for a research project, but as much as it is happening because the information about drivers who get stopped needs to be as accurate as possible. And so it would be in the interest of accuracy more than a research project.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I just think it's going to be a hard sell from the police perspective. I represent a trusted nonprofit agency, and we have to ask those questions, and we get blowback. Why do you need that information? What are you using this information for? And we're a trusted organization that's a social service agency that's helping people with specific things at that time. So I can just imagine what this would cause for the police department. So I think we need to just, know.
Yeah, no, I agree.
that's all.
So I'm not suggesting that this is an easy thing that people can just snap do. So please understand that. But I do really, really worry about this. Commissioner Mary.
I just want to say the same thing, is that I worked with Access in Durban and been around for 50 years and serving the community. And still sometimes we were asked questions like, why do you need to know? Why do I have to give that information? How you get a grant and you're going to give a report? What if they ask you? There is this lack of trust. So before, my thinking is, if we decide to go to the city council and ask for something like that, we have to have all these answers under our belly answered, because if we don't have the answer, it's too early to ask the city for resolution of this nature. So maybe we need more discussion, ask other people, did they do it? If we know of other people doing it, then when we go to the city with a resolution, say we would like this to be done, we have to have an answer. How do we gain the trust of the community? How are we going to inform people that this is going to happen? Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in a position like just as bad, if not worse.
Agreed. Commissioner Carter?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Billups. I don't think it's something that should be asked. I would not want to be asked that question. I'm wondering how often the police officer cannot tell. I mean, is that a large percentage? And I guess I'm just willing to go with their best assessment. I feel it's no data that I'm coming from. It's just from a personal feeling. I would not want to be asked that question. So I think we ought to go with what we can get.
Councilmember Romlawi and then Commissioner Todoro Hargraves.
I just have the same type of reaction to it. I am a person of color, and I'd be skeptical, even though I was born and raised here and I'm part of government. For some reason, I just don't like those invasive questions many times. I write other many times. As an Arab, I'm supposed to fill in Caucasian, and I still to this day don't understand that. And so I'm glad this discussion is being had. I just was interested in whether there's any movement at the state level to require this, so that we're dealing with consistent information across the board with all jurisdictions and law enforcement agencies, and having this information given at a time when people are probably in the most apt position to give accurate, qualified information, whether there's any efforts being made at the state level.
Commissioner Todoro Hargraves.
I think I'm going to give the viewpoint from the other side of it. And it's not because I feel we should be asking the question, or that people will not feel uncomfortable. I agree with all of you. People will feel uncomfortable. But I am somebody whose ethnic background is often mistaken. You know, I am regularly mistaken as Latina. And it's even been as recent as last year, someone who's known me for over 10 years, an acquaintance in the community, and she was shocked to hear that I was not Latina. She's known me all these years, and she thought for sure that's what I was. So I understand from the viewpoint of data collection that mistakes do get made. And I don't know how often it is. I just know I'm somebody it happens to regularly. So it is there. And, you know, maybe we need to do a sample or something like that to see, is it a problem? You know, maybe it's just me. Maybe there's only 5 of us out there that it happens to regularly. But, you know, it might be something that we may want to look at just to be sure that we have as accurate of data as we can.
Apparently, Dr. Karpiak has his hand up, and I cannot tell that from the screen. Dr. Karpiak.
Hi, thanks. I'm really appreciating this thoughtful discussion. I just wanted to say 2 things.
Wait, hold on one second. Could you just like give a couple sentences to explain why you happen to know so much about policing?
Why I happen to know so much about policing?
Yes, I don't think we've ever said that in this forum, and so that might be helpful background for what you might be getting ready to say, which I have no idea what that is.
Sure. So I've been studying policing in several contexts across the world for over 20 years now. I wrote my dissertation at UC Berkeley on community policing reforms in France, actually, and I've been a professor at EMU in the Department of Sociology, Anthropology, and Criminology, teaching mainly the classes on policing for about 12 years now. I'm the director of SMART. So my research has very much been on kind of how to assess, how to make decisions about, and how to understand specifically police administration across various contexts. So that's I guess a little bit of my CV. But just 2 things I wanted to say. One, I just wanted to make clear, because I know I opened the door a little bit when I mentioned the Open Policing Project, but the specific project that SMART is doing with Ann Arbor PD is in no way really related to this question of police asking race or not. We haven't done much analysis yet, but we have no indication that the problems that occurred in the Michigan State Police data, where over 40% of the records were marked as unknown, so any analysis of racial bias couldn't be assessed. That is not the case with the Ann Arbor Police data. I could talk more about, and certainly Chief Cox could probably talk more about the specific categories Ann Arbor Police use in their traffic stop data, which are different from, for example, what the county uses and what the state uses. They're different categories actually that they use. And I could talk a little bit more about this issue of should police ask those kinds of things is a complicated one that probably could use more discussion, but there's actually benefits to both approaches. For example, if one wanted to do an analysis of whether individual police officers are making stops or making decisions based on racial bias, actually the racial data that uses their ascribed racial category is probably actually more useful than how people themselves self-identify. Because in an order that says that, you want to understand what police themselves are seeing and then trace their decisions from what they see. On the other hand, police ascribed racial data might not give access to, for example, if there are systemic biases. For example, on a systemic level, whether we're exposing Ann Arbor residents or or people who come through Ann Arbor of color, if we're exposing them to more forms of penalty through our traffic enforcement. That might not be as legible in officer-ascribed race versus self-ascribed race. So it's a complicated issue. But as to right now, is really not part of the traffic stop study that we're doing as of right now.
Thank you for clarifying that, especially because, the research study thing got thrown around a little bit. And so I would have clarified that had you not, that this has nothing to do with the ongoing project at all. And that data, we're looking at 3-4 years ago. And so that those data points just are what they are and will not be changed by any future conversations at all. So totally unrelated to that. That conversation. I'm sorry, Councilmember Song.
But although if there is interest in like the researchy part of that, there's a really good 538 article talking about encounter denominator versus population denominator. It's why statistics don't capture the full extent of the systemic bias in policing. So it's good. It's from last year.
I have had to read some articles like that about, thanks to Dr. Karpiak. So, Commissioner Carter.
I don't want to just beat this to death, but it was interesting when Dr. Karpiak talks about the difference between self-identification and how the police identify. Maybe that's even more important. How do the police identify the person that they are dealing with? I think that's very interesting.
That's why we are lucky to have experts.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Commissioner Othman, did you have your hand up as well?
Well, I had one, and if the issue of asking or not asking about ethnicity at traffic stop is not really pursued, at least of the data collected, you can't go and change it. For prospective data, if that question is going to be there, would it be easier for the duration of the project? So if we're going to be doing a year or a few months or so down the road, that individuals who are conducting the research would be accompanying the police, and they will ask the question, not the police. The researchers would ask the question. Would this somehow make things a little bit easier for responders, for the people who are going to be stopped? That it's not the bias coming from the police. It's just, this is for research purposes only, and I'm doing the research, not the police. The police stopped you, but this is my question to you. Is this?
There are a lot of different ways to do it. I mean, the city could explore adding more boxes. I prefer not to say, or we have an unknown box because no one is actually saying why is Arab American not an option, for example. So the city could explore lots of different things. And as Commissioner Carter said, I don't want to belabor the point. So we could move on and talk about traffic stops in another context, which is, I am sure you are all aware that the city of Philadelphia has joined several other cities in having police officers no longer make what they call low-level traffic stops. And so those things include temporary registration permits that are visible to law enforcement, but in the wrong place. For example, motorists would no longer be stopped for such infraction. They would no longer be stopped for having one brake light out, one headlight out, one running lamp out, one turn signal out, one light in a turn signal out, one light out in a cluster of lights. All of these things are currently illegal in Michigan. Objects hanging from a rear view mirror that do not obstruct the driver's view. I know some of you have had conversations about graduation tassels. I was recounting how when my daughter was in a wheelchair, we had the handicap placard that we'd have to put in when we parked and take it out when we backed out of the parking space. And I got ticketed at some point for having the thing hanging while we were still driving. And we had to constantly take it up and down, and got a ticket once because it was in the front window, but not hanging. So I got 2 tickets for the reverse kinds of things. And those are things for which the Philadelphia police can no longer stop people. They could certainly mail them in the, citations. These are civil infractions, as we have discussed here before. And they can certainly ticket them for those things if they're stopping them for something else, like running a red light, etc. And so they have made a pretty clear delineation of things. They did not have an exhaustive list, but they have kind of indicated these are primary things that officers may stop people for as far as traffic violations. But these things are lower level, is what they called them, sort of infractions that we are not going to have. Officers are no longer going to be able to pull people over and ticket them for solely these things. There is, of course, I think a 90-day or 120-day training period for police to get used to the new law, and then it will be implemented. You all know that the Washtenaw County prosecutor talked about pretextual stops, and he did clarify, sometimes that kind of sounds like a dirty word, but that police officers are often able to cite any number of infractions to pull someone over, and that they were no longer going to prosecute cases where it seemed as if evidence was collected after, that kind of stop. I have had an officer sit me down and list just off the top of his head at least 50 kinds of tiny infractions for which they could pull anyone over at any time. So the city of Philadelphia's list is certainly not exhaustive of that. But it's an interesting thing to ponder, whether those are things that this city might consider, whether it is necessary or appropriate to pull people over for those kinds of stops. In Ellie Savitt's, I don't know what they call it, in his bulletin, sort of, when he made that announcement, he cited lots of stops. And you guys have heard me say that traffic stops are the #1 way that people come in contact with the police. We know you've already talked about undocumented people here. This is, I'm sure all of you have been in the position. I've certainly had people, undocumented people, talk to me about the fear with which they drive or ride with someone if they have papers. If a family member does not have documentation, the fear of driving to, simple things like the grocery store or the market, for fear of being pulled over. And that then leading to, other kinds of consequences for them. And so we might want to ponder where, what the city would be willing to consider, if anything, in that vein. The other thing that Philadelphia did in tandem with that was that they made all traffic stop information available to the public. And so they are every month going to publish information about where a traffic stop occurred, in what area it occurred, what police officer was assigned to that area, the date, the time, the location, year, make, model, the driver's race, ethnicity, and gender, the race, ethnicity, and gender of any passengers, the primary vehicle violation, and any and all secondary violations, what police action was taken, whether there was a warning given or a ticket given, or whether people were arrested, whether the car was searched or not, whether people were searched or not, whether the stop resulted in contraband, whether it was a firearm or narcotics or other kinds of, other contraband that might have been collected. And all of that information will now be publicly available, and it will be updated every month. And then an annual report detailing that information will be published each year by the police department. And what that would mean for Ann Arbor is that the information that we have now about traffic stops for a couple of years would be public to everyone. And there's an argument that that data already belongs to the people, because it is the people being pulled over and stopped. And that that is certainly, there's no argument that's certainly a step in the direction of transparency. Comments, questions, and thoughts about that? Y'all are surprisingly quiet on that one. Okay.
I was waiting for someone else to join in first, but I think that a lot of that is great. I think, I don't know how we get that happening here or countywide or statewide, but I know personally myself as an African-American man, I've been stopped on numerous occasions by different police departments, and it seemed frivolous as to why I was stopped. And it's been because of things like you have a tassel hanging or your license plate is covered. And by the way, can I, in the past, it hasn't happened in a long time, but, can I look in your car, those kind of things, right? So, and I know of plenty of young people who I work with, who we try to educate with, all of those concerns about all of those things, that these might be reasons that you might get stopped. So I think that there are reasons why some of those things should not be on the list. And Chairperson, just like you, I've spoken to other police officers who've given me a list of all the possible ways that they can stop someone. And I'm not saying that, I think that the issue is also about fairness and equality, right? That are you stopping people in other neighborhoods just like you would stop people in poor neighborhoods or minority neighborhoods for the same thing, that kind of stuff. So I think it's something for us to discuss. I think we got a while to try to figure out how we add those kind of things and how we take into, talk with the police department to find out about those things. I think the information, the data that will come from, 17, 18, and 19 will allow us to see if there are some things like that we can say, yeah, this is a problem in Ann Arbor, or we say it's not a problem in Ann Arbor. Maybe it's outlying areas, or maybe it's just the state police, who knows? So.
Any other comments? Okay, Commissioner Tadoro Hargraves is going to give us an update on the complaint review process. And if it feels like you've heard updates on the complaint review process before, that would be correct. But unfortunately, the complaint review process is an ongoing evolution and is still evolving in terms of how that happens. So she will update us again. And I suspect again next month based on new information today.
Yes, we will. It's definitely an ongoing process. I do want to give a shout out to our IT department, or the city's IT department. They've been meeting with us over the last month and trying to give us meaning the information managers, the proper access to things that we need, such as evidence.com and body cam footage and reports and so on, and how we do that in a secure manner. And what they're also working very closely with Ms. Janess on is setting up a dashboard so that as the complaints are filed on our webpage, Ms. Janess and the 5 information managers will get a notification that a complaint has been filed. And we will immediately be able to start processing that complaint through the process that we're putting together now, the written process. And that dashboard we'll be able to go to for regular updates and tracking. We are also then able to, and that one's ready, pretty much almost ready to go for our use. Then IT is also working on taking that dashboard and reconfiguring it so it'll look the same, but like officers' names will be redacted or witnesses' names will be redacted so that it can be put on for public view. So that way anybody in the public can click on the dashboard and see that complaint number 65 is under review by the information managers, or complaint 72 is pending police review. So that'll be a regular update system. The third thing, which will be a part of our webpage, is as we do our final documents, the PDFs of those final documents can be placed on our webpage so that anybody can go and see what were our findings for complaint 75. And those, if need be, will be redacted. But as far as officers' names will be redacted. And something, I know we've spoken about this before, but this comes into importance when we talk about what our final document is going to look like. So when a complaint goes in directly to the police department, ICPOC is not informed of the complainant's name. That is kept confidential due to victims' rights. So we never see the complainant's name or contact information or anything like that. So when the final document comes, we don't necessarily have a complainant to send it to. Whereas if the complaint is filed through ICPOC, I know that, Dr. Lisa Jackson is the complainant, and I can send her a letter saying, here are our findings. So in the case of when we do not have the complainant's name, what we are looking at doing is doing basically an internal memorandum. So the information managers assigned to the review of the complaint will do a memorandum to the full commission stating what our findings are. And then it'll, like I said, that document will be made into a PDF and it'll be put onto our webpage. Now, if that complainant for complaint number 20-035 is out there and they know that that was their file, their case number or their complaint number, they can go on and see what our findings were and decide if they want to contact us or not. So that's one of the reasons why we're looking at being able to put that up there so that the public can see what our findings are for each of the complaint reviews. And I am excited to say is I think we have reviewed all of the 2020 complaints, and we are at the point where we're putting together our findings for them now.
And just to clarify, I know we have talked about this before, but there is no point at which a complainant's name, even though we know it, would be put on the public dashboard unless they have consented to do that. So just because we know who they are does not mean that we assume necessarily that they want that information made public. We would check with them before doing that, and they certainly have the option to have their name redacted as well as any other identifying information that might make it obvious who they are, so that people don't worry about retaliation, for example.
Mhm.
So just wanted to, I know that might have been obvious to everyone, but I just wanted to make sure we clarified that. Councilmember Rumlawi, did you have your hand up and put it down, or was it up from before? I apologize.
It did. I mean, these are always good conversations. I always have thoughts that come up. Will this dashboard have kind of an archive?
Oh, yeah.
Information people can go back and
Yep, right now our complaints on our dashboard that come in directly to ICPOC are running complaints. So we could go back and see a complaint that came in 2020.
And while it's showing that it's under review by the commission, will it be aging so it can give folks like real-time information that this has been under review for 64 days or 91 days or?
It should show the date when something moved. So for example, the police always have that first. And so it may have the date that it goes to police, and then you could see, oh, it's been there for X number of days. And then, oh, the police have finished their review, we're beginning ours. And you could see the date that happened. And then you could say, oh, ICPOC has been looking at this for X days. So we should be able to have like a time component in there as well. At least, very least, people will be able to tell where is it in the process.
And they can do
Like, because there's an interim step, right? So the police look at it and do their investigation, then we communicate with the police. And so that's a process that has to happen before we can even start to, come to any conclusions about what happened. And so that's an interim step even between us sort of, coming to any conclusions about it. And so we could delineate all those different sort of steps in the process so people know where things are. Oh, questions? Okay, Commissioner Hoffman.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Commissioner Dora was saying, is also we started having, or we're going to have meetings among the managers prior to meeting with the chief and the deputies and the PSS lieutenant. So we have more of information, knowledge about our cases, and to speak with some degree of unity and uniformity about our reviews and of the data, videos, and texts, etc. So we are taking that as another step to at least familiarize ourselves as managers with our cases.
Just trying to streamline the process a bit is what that is, so that we can get through more cases a little bit more quickly. But part of what slows us down is that the process is continually being revised and revisited. And so you would think that we've been in existence for 2 years and this would be clear, but we did not have to reinvent a wheel, but rather we had to adopt the many models we had from other cities and other municipalities and other oversight agencies to make it work for Ann Arbor. And that's been quite challenging. Today, we just found out about another piece of information that we will now begin having access to for the first time in 2021. And so I understand that it can be frustrating to feel as if nothing is moving, but that is not for lack of trying on our part. To be clear, there is a lot of energy spent on trying to make sure that we got all of the information that we need to do our job, and that is continuing to happen. If there are no other questions, comments, thoughts, we could talk about the one piece of new business we have, which is the ICPOC retreat report. And ICPOC participated in a strategic planning retreat with Councilmember Song and many of you present here, where we worked on some of the goals for the upcoming year, but also, goals going forward as well, sort of some short and long-term goals. And we wrote a report. So Commissioner Carter was kind enough to take that on, and I think we all added some parts to it and she wrote a draft of the report of the retreat, because we did get some inquiries from the public about that, about what we did and what we accomplished. And so I do not know if you want me to share my screen of that, and if other commissioners want some input on that, if you would like me to email it around and then have you all give comments back, and then we can publish that final version. We do that in a number of ways. What is your preference? I know that at least one draft was emailed to everyone with a request for comments, and there were some comments that were given, and we can do that process again. If nobody has any revisions to it, we can email this last draft around, and everybody, and if you have nothing to add, we can just put it on our website so people can see what we did. I can just briefly summarize. There was brainstorming about how to fulfill the mission that we have. We talked about barriers to doing our work, how we are learning best practices and being trained in this area, thinking about future goals, more community outreach, increasing the awareness of the commission within the community, making sure it is clear what this commission does and what this commission does not do, talking a little tiny bit about the pandemic and the challenges that that's posed. There are certainly some opportunities that have come because of the pandemic as well, such as our ability now to remotely access information that we would have all had to troop into the Justice Center to sort of watch body cam footage all at once, look at pieces of paper that we could not copy or have copies of, and now we're able to get secure information, and all information managers can review body cam footage at 3 a.m. if they need to, at 2 p.m. if they need to. So that is a blessing of the pandemic, but you know, that we kind of talked about what the vision was for this commission. So I can certainly email it to commissioners and council members, and you all can, anybody who was present and you wanted to add to it, you can do so, and then we can publish this final version on our website if you like.
Okay. Give us a deadline. You need information by when? In a week?
Hold on. I have a calendar to my right. It looks like I'm looking off into space, but maybe we could have it back by November 4th.
Okay.
Commissioner Hoffman, did you have a question?
Do we have to make a motion to agree on the draft or the final version of the summary of our retreat, or because it's just information, we can have it over there? Just I want to make sure if we have a motion, does this mean that it has more of legal standing versus just information?
I think it is just an informational piece. We had some inquiries about what did you guys do in your strategic planning, and so Commissioner Carter was kind enough to kind of write that up, just write up an informational report about what happened. And I just want to make sure that it reflects everybody who was there and participated, and that people agree on what it is, and then we can share that with the public. So I'm not sure we need a motion for that, but I mean, there could be a scenario in which she just wrote it up and it was just put on the website.
I'm okay with any way we present this material.
All right, well, I will send it to everyone. I will send this last draft to everyone, and you all can give comment by November 4th if you're able, and then we can get it up on the website. And the last thing we have to talk about, report from committees. We haven't had any standing committee meetings, with the exception of the group of people who are led by Commissioner Walton, who have been interviewing applicants to our who wish to join our commission. And so we had lots of scheduling issues, but we have interviewed the first round of people, and we have currently 3 openings, and we have interviewed 4 people. And so when Commissioner Walton returns, we will collectively make a decision about those 3 individuals. whom we'd like to ask our council members to present to the larger city council. So we have completed step one, the hardest, longest part of that process, in interviewing everyone. Each candidate had some really interesting perspectives and would bring value to our commission. So we have good trouble in that we have to select from 3 of those 4 people, but that's a good problem to have. And we anticipate that we'll be able to make the next step, take the next step in that process in the next week or so. So just an update, because I know many of you have been wondering about that. And so we expect to bring on 3 new commissioners at once. And we've also been working hard at having a formal orientation. We are very lucky to have Commissioner Walton, who is an HR expert, and she has standardized our interview process. She has questions have been constructed by everybody. We all had a chance to weigh in on questions. They were sent to applicants in advance so that they could prepare thoughtful responses to them. And so the dialogue that we had was we could compare apples to apples. And so that was very helpful. And then we will standardize the process for asking council to consider our selections. But we're looking forward to having some new members and for them to bring their expertise to this group. Councilmember Song.
So that won't be in time for next Monday's meeting, though. Are you aiming for the second meeting in November?
I think we're going to have to, because we had, for one candidate, we had 3 people interviewing that person. For 2, we had all 4. And then for the third person, we only had 3. So we have to come together and make sure that we're all on the same page about trying to evaluate which 3 we'd like to ask you all to put forward. And so we'll do that when Commissioner Walton returns.
Okay, great.
We will do it quickly, though. Like, we're prepped and ready to go as soon as that conversation happens. We promise, because we need the help.
Okay, great. Yeah, if we can put it on the agenda a week before the
Yeah,
meeting.
so I will text you guys. I will let you guys know as soon as we get to that step. And also, when I know when she's coming back, I may be able to anticipate when we can do it even before we've done the last step. So I may be able to give you guys a heads up even before we have gotten there. I wouldn't be able to tell you the names, but I would be able to tell you, hey, by this date, we'll know.
Great,
And then
thank
you guys can get it on your agenda. That would be fantastic, because we would like to be as expeditious as possible. Councilmember Ramlawi?
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for the committee that's doing the work. As you know, I've been kind of knocking on the door asking about that for quite some time. I assume, and I shouldn't assume, but I will ask, have all these applicants applied through the city's process? And that, okay. And are they all residents of Ann Arbor? Are they going to require a 7-vote requirement if they're outside of Ann Arbor?
They actually may all be residents.
Okay. And now the idea and the practice and before was for the council liaisons for this commission and the Human Rights Commission to take a look at the names before proceeding to council with them. So as eager as I am to present those in response to that list of names, I would like the privilege, if I could, to be able to look at those perhaps as soon as possible before it gets sent to council.
Right, you guys can do that as long as you need to. We just want to get it in your hands.
The subset, the four council members, that would be, I think, very helpful for us to see ahead of time. I know we want to fill these positions as fast as possible, but I do need some time to look.
Right. So we prefer that everyone apply through the city process. We would prefer for all of our processes to be equal. It would be helpful if people would go through the city process and answer the questions that were developed by the Human Rights Commission. We've tweaked them just a tiny bit to make them current. So we're not asking, for example, what you might hope that this commission would accomplish in its first 2 years. Since we are now 2 years old, we're asking about the next 2 years, just to make that current. But we find it useful for people to actually answer those questions. And so we would prefer that people not kind of skip that step, that they would apply by completing the application online. And all of these applicants have done that. And so you guys have access to that system, you can pull them. And then the questions that we asked were actually iterations of those questions that were on the application. And we just discussed those things with them. So you all can look at those applicants, and we will give you the 3 that we'd like to put forward. We'll let you know who those are as soon as we make a decision, and we will do that as soon as humanly possible. We're trying to be very as professional about that as possible, and we're trying to standardize the process so that it happens the same for everybody else going forward as well, and so that we could answer intelligent questions about why we thought one person might be more appropriate than another person. Although each of the candidates that we interviewed in this round would benefit us, and we may be in the lucky position of having a person waiting in the wings when a person rolls off this commission, which would be a luxury, but a happy one to have. So, but we want to make sure that we follow a standardized process so that everybody has, everyone is given the same thoughtful consideration, and we have a record of why we made the decisions that we made. And so we're going to do that. And as soon as we get to that step, we will let you guys know, and you all can make your deliberations as the 4. And then you can decide when to take it to the bigger group. And certainly you can ask us any questions and we'll be able to answer them because we all have lots of copious notes. And we were really clear about documenting notes for every respondent so that we could also standardize that process. So. Okay, so I think Commissioner Hoffman.
Yeah, just before we finish that, also would like to inform the rest of the commissioners as well as the liaisons about few of us had finished the 3 trauma sessions training that we just finished this past Thursday on using trauma-informed approach to create culturally inclusive and safe communities. The slides for those sessions will be available for all of us as commissioners, and also will be probably available on the website for community at large to look into if this is permissible kind of thing. In addition,
right, we had a wonderful facilitator, a professional who took us through this process of training us and thinking about trauma-informed responses from policing, but also having us examine our own positions and our own biases, which was informative and challenging, and but I think a growth opportunity for everyone. And was well worth the time spent. We did 3 several sessions, several weeks apart. We had homework in between. Everyone who participated worked really, really hard. Some of the work was intensely personal. Much of it was challenging, but it challenged us to see things from multiple points of view. And so it was a lot of work, but it was very, very helpful to us. And it helped us think about how we need to do our work and take into consideration the community and the officers who are policing in the community. So it was often tough. Commissioner Carter.
Unmute myself. Yeah, if Commissioner Hoffman hadn't brought it up, I was going to, because I think it was a really good and I'm not one for touchy-feely kinds of things. But the whole issue of trauma-informed took on a sort of a different meaning in that everybody involved has some kind of trauma. The community and the police officers, and we were challenged to see what personally can we bring to the processes that we are going through. And so I would encourage those commissioners who were not able to participate, to go through those materials because it was a very good session. So
3 very intense sessions.
Yeah.
3 2-hour or something sessions. Yeah, it was a good program.
Yeah, we had a very experienced facilitator, as you can imagine, trying to navigate, taking all of us with our different experiences through it. And she managed that well. She has done that before. She works often with police officers, and that training probably stood her in good stead when she had to work with the group of us. And so it was very, very useful. Thank you so much, Commissioner Hoffman, for bringing that up. Any other communications? Any other public comment? Denise, any callers? Dr. Karpiak, any parting words? Thank you for hanging out with us for so long. I feel like
I have nothing.
we've just like drafted you into this group. It's probably hard enough that you have to work with us on traffic stop data, but now you've had to hang out for the whole meeting. Thank you, though. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Denise?
No one had public comment.
Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn then?
Motion to adjourn our October meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
So my